know. Let's give a round of applause for all those amazing films. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures, the largest institution in the United States dedicated to the arts, science, and artists of filmmaking. The Academy Museum of Motion Pictures acknowledges the Tongva people as the traditional caretakers of the water and land on which we program, curate, convene, educate, and discuss. We honor and respect Tongva ancestors and the Tongva community today, which continue to nurture this land and water through traditional practice, activism, art, and education. We also acknowledge their continued work to safeguard cultural resources. My name is Amy Homa, and I'm the Chief Audience Officer here at the museum. Thank you so much for joining us tonight at the David Geffen Theater for the Best Picture panel presented as part of our nominee programs. Nominee program support is provided by Clarendale and Domaine Clarence Dillon, the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures official wine, and additional support for nominee programs is provided by Delta Airlines. Tonight's panel discussion with the producers of nominated Best Picture films will be moderated by Lynette Howell-Taylor, Governor of the Producers Branch of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. I'd like to pause and thank our ASL interpreters who will be assisting today. Their names are Timothy Lane and Vilix Villarreal. Thank you so much for being here. Nominee programs bring screenings of Academy Award-nominated shorts and panels with Academy Award-nominated filmmakers, all in the lead-up to the '96 Oscars, and we do that here at the museum and present it to our public. We have additional nominee programs later this week, including panels with the nominees from International Feature Film tomorrow and Makeup and Hairstyling on Saturday. And on Oscar Sunday, you can join us here at the museum in this very theater to watch the '96 Academy Awards live on ABC. You can learn more and get your tickets at academymuseum.org. Before we begin our program, I'd like to ask for everyone to please silence and darken and stow your mobile devices, including phones. Now, please help me in welcoming to the stage the Associate Director, Member, and Industry Relations, Josh Nelathambi.
All right, thank you, Amy, and thank you to the entire museum team for putting together these fantastic programs all week. Good evening, everyone. My name is Josh Nelathambi, and I'm honored to be here today representing the Academy's Membership and Awards Department as the staff lead for the Producers Branch. So some of you in the audience might be wondering, there are thousands of films that come out every year across the globe. How exactly do we get to these 10 as Best Picture nominees? And while most of the discussion in the media or trades often circles around the Oscar wars, the campaign, the race, we'd like to take this moment to shed some light on how a film becomes eligible and nominated for Best Picture. So this past year in 2023, there were 265 films that were deemed eligible for Best Picture. This means that all of these films completed a qualifying theatrical run and met the Academy's newly enforced representation and inclusion standards. Then, in the nominations voting round that occurred in January, members can submit a ballot of up to 10 films in ranked choice order from that list of 265. So for voting, think of it like each member submits their own top 10 list. I'm sure many of you in this room have one as well, maybe you post on Letterboxd, Reddit, whatever. Our partners at PwC then tabulate these ballots, and then the 10 films that receive the requisite number of first place votes are then nominated. These are the films we have tonight. And unlike other categories in the nominations round, Best Picture is open to all voting members, regardless of branch, whereas you would have the acting branch nominates the acting categories, the director's branch nominates the directing categories. This category is voted on by the over 10,000 members of the Academy who are the leading professionals in this industry. This means that the films nominated this year can truly be considered representative of the global filmmaking industry's definition of cinematic excellence for 2023. And I think I speak for everyone in this room by saying it's a really great lineup, right? It's a pretty strong lineup. Nothing but bangers. I'd be remiss to not acknowledge our incredible staff team here at the Academy who act as producers in their own ways and working with our studios, filmmakers, and our branch executive committees to make sure this process runs smoothly. So thank you to Natalie Wade and our awards administration team for managing submissions and rules, Bev Kite and our IT team for sustaining our Academy screening room, and of course, President Janet Yang, CEO Bill Kramer, and Chief Membership Officer Meredith Shea for their continued leadership of this organization. The branch would also like to give a special thank you to our partners at the Producers Guild of America for all the information they provide to the branch in the Best Picture process and for their continual year-round advocacy and support for all producers. Tonight, we're going to hear from some of these producers, the people who worked tirelessly over the last few years to make these films a reality. And our moderator tonight is someone who understands producing and the Oscars deeply. She's produced Oscar-nominated films such as Half Nelson, Blue Valentine, and Captain Fantastic, and is a former nominee in this category for producing the 2018 film A Star is Born. She's also produced the actual Academy Awards ceremony themselves, co-producing the 92nd Oscars with Stephanie Elaine. Since 2020, she's been serving on our Board of Governors as one of the elected representatives from the producers branch, where she now chairs our awards committee. So I can think of no better person to guide you all through this program tonight. Please welcome Academy Governor Lynette Howell-Taylor.
Thank you so much, Josh. Welcome, everybody. I'm thrilled to be here this evening to celebrate the Oscar-nominated Best Picture producers. I'm Lynette Howell-Taylor, and I am also a producer, so I have a real affection for this group of people who have worked unbelievably hard, not only to have gotten their movies made, which is no small miracle unto itself, but to have taken them all the way to the Academy Awards. So often producing is not a job that we are given. Every movie is like being the CEO of a startup. It's our job to make something out of nothing. That can sometimes mean sourcing a book and then finding a writer, going after life rights of someone famous, or even when we join a project with a written screenplay, we are the ones tasked with figuring out how to make that screenplay a reality. We are often the first ones on board, and more often the last ones left standing. I'm still in charge of tax returns from a movie that I made years and years and years ago. Producers are enablers, advocates, advisors, and accountants. Our job is both creative and logistical, and it is never the same. Every movie has a unique set of characters and rules. The world that we are a part of creating is different every single time. And that's why it's so great to talk to producers about their individual movies and their specific journeys, from inception all the way to this coming weekend. I learn something new with every producer that I talk to, and I'm excited for all of us to gain a little more insight in their magnificent work. So to start off the program, we'll begin with a clip from the first nominated film, American Fiction.
When was the last time we were here together?
Maybe 10 years. Kids were still little.
Yeah. How was your family, by the way?
You actually care?
Of course. Why would I ask? Why would you ask me that?
I don't know, Monk. You never really call.
I get busy.
Yeah, everybody gets busy. You drift away.
All successful writers are tormented by their families.
The only emotions I remember from Dad were boredom and rage.
Is boredom an emotion?
Editors want a black book.
Look at what they expect us to write. I'm sick of it.
Is it bad to cater to people's tastes?
It's not real.
Geniuses are lonely. They can't connect with the rest of us.
One day, maybe you'll learn that not being able to relate to other people isn't a badge of honor.
I find myself getting very angry these days.
These days? People want to love you, Monk. I personally don't know what they see in you, but they want to love you. You should let them love all of you.
Please welcome to the stage Jermaine Johnson, Nikos Karamigios, and Ben LeClair, producers of American Fiction. Hi, gents.
Hey.
Hi. Hello.
Okay, so producing films on a small budget is challenging. I know this too. What were some of the greatest challenges you faced that were budget related, and how did you overcome them?
Well, as you know better than all of us, low-budget filmmaking is typically about time or lack thereof. I don't think we had the least amount of days on the movies nominated, but I think we're close. We had 26 days. And just about every day, we had to wrap out our location for a new one the next day. So it is draining. But the key, the first thing is the script. A great script can open a lot of doors creatively, but definitely financially. One of our main jobs is to recruit a team, a family, to make this thing. And a great script will get people to break out to their comfort zone, both creatively and economically. So getting actors to come to the table for less than their quote, getting crew to come to the table for less than their quote. A script will do that. And while you're making the movie, you get greater dedication from everyone because they think they're doing something as a chance to make a lasting statement, which is ultimately the goal for all these movies. We want them to survive, to stand out in a crowd and all those things, but the script is probably the top way to save money. That being said, my father, who's 80, built the wedding arbor in the movie and delivered it in a rainstorm. That beach house belonged to my 6th grade art teacher. My best friend, or one of my oldest friends, made food for the cast at 1 a.m. Out at the beach. You do with what you can with what you have, but it's a mix of all those things.
By the way, you told me the story the other day about how this was like your hometown, and I love that story. Was it emotional for you going back there?
It was very emotional. It was very unintended. We wanted to make the movie in Boston for a variety of practical reasons, but from there were a lot of beaches between Boston and Cape Cod, and a lot of beach houses. And we just happened to land in the town that I grew up in from 0 to 18, and I found myself making a movie there, and it was just a complete trip, and I'll never forget it.
I love that story. So this is Jefferson's feature film debut. As producers, can you tell us some of the ways that you approach working with a first-time director as opposed to someone more experienced?
Well, I want to qualify that a little bit, because although he had never directed anything before, he had a lot of TV writing experience, and before that he was a journalist. And one of the things, there were 2 things really that were clear about Cord from the first time that we met him. One was that this story is intensely personal for him, both kind of sides of the story, the professional satire and the kind of the family drama. He's got real personal connections to both of those elements. And so it was clear that he had a very clear vision of the story that he wanted to tell. He had a great command of the material. He's also just a very talented communicator. That's something that he was kind of born with. It's a talent of his. And we knew that those 2 things could kind of carry us through, even though he didn't have any practical directing experience. So one of the other things about Cord is that he's very transparent. He has almost no ego. It's one of the things we love about him. And he said, I don't know what I don't know, and I can understand if department heads don't want to take time off of their very difficult jobs to also be a teacher to me and kind of bring me up as a filmmaker and kind of coach me up. So our job as his producers really was to surround him with people who were up for that, who didn't mind, and who were excited about kind of helping foster kind of a new voice as a director. And so I think we got really lucky with the department heads. A lot of it has to do with what Ben said. People were excited to be a part of this because it was such a great script that was there from the beginning. But we leaned on department heads in ways that I haven't previously had to in filmmaking. A good example of this is our DP, Christina Dunlap, and our editor, Hilda Rasula, communicated more directly during the shoot than I've ever had a DP and an editor communicate to ensure that we were getting the coverage, on our limited time scale that we knew that we would need, and that, Cord didn't know that he would necessarily need when he got to the edit room. So Cord knew how he wanted the actors to perform, and he was a tremendously assured guide with all that, with performance, but he didn't have that kind of technical knowledge about I'm going to go to this, I'm going to go to the wide, then I'm going to come into the close, all of that stuff. Like he didn't have that language, so we kind of relied on these 2 to kind of interface in a way that would protect him in the edit room. And Ben was also really good about this. It was kind of a team effort, just kind of figuring out, did we get everything that we need to get? And, if we hadn't had all of these positions be so game to do things like that, then the movie would not have come together at such a high level, I don't think.
Jeffrey Wright is brilliant, as usual. Jefferson basically wrote the script for Wright, and there was no one else he wanted Monk, the protagonist, to be depicted by, or so I've been told. Tell us about Wright's first conversation with Jefferson about this project and what it meant for you as the producers to have Wright on board.
Well, I can confirm. He only had Jeffrey in his mind from the moment he read the book. I was there very early. He called me the moment he picked the book up. And he said, I'm reading this book in Jeffrey Wright's voice. And as Jeffrey will tell you, that is an alarming thing. But from the very first conversation, he came back to me and said, Jeffrey really understands the kind of movie that we want to make. It's not something that is, this kind of talented thing. And I don't know if you know what that is, but it's something that W.B. Du Bois talked about, the talented tenth of black people that are supposed to be the people that bring up the rest of the race. And that's not the movie we wanted to make. That's not the conversation we wanted to have. We wanted to make something that was inclusive for everyone to come in and be invited into the conversation. And that was something that Jeffrey had asked Cord about immediately from the very first meeting. And Cord says, no, we want to make the same movie. And from there, it was off to the races. And, I'm waiting by the phone just to find out how that meeting went. And Cord comes back and he says, I think he's the guy that I always thought he was, which is kind of amazing. And to kind of your second question of what does it mean to have Jeffrey Wright? The most amazing experience of all of this is speaking to people that say, Jeffrey Wright's one of my favorite actors. And Jeffrey has done that by being number one on the call sheet not very many times. Jeffrey's done that, with Basquiat, and then being in The Hunger Games, or being in Wes Anderson movies, or being in Batman, or, all of these other movies where he was 3, 4, 5 just off in a different space, and he's gotten so many people to just be a fan of his in a way that now he's getting a moment where everybody's being reminded of how great he really is, and it's just bringing that up in their hearts to be like, oh my God, I love Jeffrey Wright. He's amazing. And that has meant so much to us as producers, to see somebody that we've always loved get the recognition that we know he deserves.
I love that. Yes, that does deserve a round of applause. Okay, final question. I think whenever there's more than one producer on a movie, I love to ask how the three of you work together, and how do you divide responsibilities? What's that collaboration like?
I think you should take this one.
That's exactly how we do it.
We're not all going to answer this. We work collaboratively here. That's what we do.
I'm the oldest.
The eldest boy, as it were.
Producing partnerships are key. It's really hard to do the job alone. I would argue it's just about impossible to do alone. And we worked really well by trusting each other, communicating well. And I think there was kind of a natural delineation of tasks in places where we typically were overseeing something more than others. But we work as a group. It's fluid. We're moving around. And it's also typically a 2-year process, but in every phase of production. But it's a blend. And Cord, was a major part of that as well.
Yeah, I concur.
I wish I could talk to you guys all night. This is going to go so fast because we have a lot of movies to get through. So first of all, thank you to the nominees of American Fiction for joining us. And congratulations on your nomination.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So much.
Next up is Anatomy of a Fall. Unfortunately, the filmmakers were unable to make it at the last minute, so they've shared some remarks that we will read after their clip, but let's take a look. This is a statement from the filmmakers. Our journey from the Croisette to this moment has been nothing short of astonishing. Watching audiences around the world discover and champion this film has been an adventure we'll never forget. Thank you to our department heads, cast, crew, and everyone who came out to theaters around the world. You made all of this possible, and we want to recognize our fearless leader, Justin Triet, her incredible partner in craft and life, Arthur Harari, and Neon for their support. We are so sorry to miss tonight, but want to congratulate the other nominees. We are so inspired by your work and cannot believe we are recognized alongside these incredible talents. We can't wait to celebrate alongside you this weekend. So thank you to the nominees of Anatomy of a Fall, and congratulations on your nomination. Now, let's take a look at the clip from our next film, Barbie.
Yes, Barbie changed everything.
Hi, Ken.
Hi.
This is the best day ever. It is the best day ever, and so is yesterday, and so is tomorrow, and so is the day after tomorrow, and every day from now until forever. Do you guys ever think about dying? Bad breath this morning, a cold shower, burnt waffle, and falling off my roof. I'm fine. You're malfunctioning.
You can go back to your regular life, or you can know the truth about the universe.
The first one, the high heel.
No. We'll do a redo. You're supposed to want to know. I don't. You have to want to know.
Barbie, in the real world.
Everything exists to expand and elevate the presence of men.
This isn't what I thought it was. It never is.
Oh, hi.
Take my hands. Now feel.
It is literally impossible to be a woman. And it kills me that you don't think you're good enough.
It's Barbie and Ken. There is no just Ken.
Maybe all the things that you thought made you you aren't really you. I want to be part of the people that make meaning, not the thing that's made.
Oh, are we on? Okay. Introducing one of the producers of Barbie, Robbie Brenner. Hi. It gives me so much joy watching that trailer. Doesn't it give you joy watching that trailer?
Yes, it gives me joy. It never gets old.
It never gets old. Okay, so when you were appointed to lead Mattel Films in 2018, I understand you had a list of titles from their IP that you identified could be developed into film. So how did you come to decide on Barbie, and then how did Margot Robbie with Lucky Chap become involved in producing the project?
Well, when I came to Mattel in 2018, I went through the hundreds and hundreds of brands, and I sort of distilled it into the 45 that I thought would have an amazing theatrical experience. And of course, you know, Barbie and Hot Wheels being sort of the two biggest brands at Mattel. But I actually never thought that we would make a Barbie movie first. It was the most daunting one there was. I thought, oh my God, how do you even make a Barbie movie? This is crazy. But, and then, you know, Lucky Chap, Margot and Tom had approached us, and we decided that we were going to partner and do this together, and we set it up at Warner Brothers. And actually, before Greta came on board, we probably heard like 45 different takes. I mean, there was a portal and a thing to the thing, and someone came out of the closet, and, you know, and we thought, oh no, I don't think that's the Barbie movie. But Margot had this amazing idea to hire Greta. She had collaborated with Greta on something else, and of course, you know, Greta is just amazing. And we all said, of course, we want Greta to direct this movie. And so we flew to New York, and we sat down with Greta and Noah. And she said, I love Barbie so much. I grew up with Barbie. I love Barbie. I feel like Barbie has so much to say. I have so much to say. I'm not sure exactly what the movie is, but I think it lives somewhere in between a Birkenstock and a high heel. And I was like, well, that's brilliant. So, so that's really what we had. That was sort of her leaping off point, and she went off and wrote the script.
I love that. Being that Barbie is a huge pop cultural icon, the doll has various significances for many people. During the script development stage, were there any important themes and ideas expressed that were particularly special to you that you wanted the film to get across?
Well, as I was just saying that, it was sort of a surprise when it arrived in my inbox. I mean, imagine this was the most exciting thing that ever happened to me. It was COVID, and it was like every day was like Groundhog's Day, and then the Barbie script appeared. So it was amazing that day, and I sat down and read the script, and it was 148 pages. It was, and on the front page it said, "Don't worry, everybody's going to speak very, very, very quickly." But I just remember reading the script and thinking to myself, I was laughing out loud, I was screaming to myself, I was crying. I thought, this is just so incredible and so bold and so authentic and so amazing. Like, I couldn't even believe what I was reading. I wanted somebody to be there with me. It really did embody all of the things that beyond what I ever imagined for a Barbie movie, the empowering women, dissecting women, understanding men, understanding this very, very complicated and complex world that we're living in today. And I think she was able to sort of unpack it in a way that felt like incredibly entertaining, but yet it's so emotional and it's provocative and it's empowering. So I feel like it did everything I could have ever imagined and more.
The film has many colorful sets designed by Sarah Greenwood. Some of the sets pay homage to classic musical numbers. What were your favorite scenes to shoot?
Well, when I first arrived, we were shooting the dance sequence, the Dance the Night Away, the Dua Lipa. I think that was like 3 days of shooting, and it was just amazing. I mean, the whole set, this sort of dream house, and just the costumes and the colors, and everybody was so happy. It was really, not like most sets that you go on. Everybody was wearing pink every day. So that was wonderful. But I mean, all of the sets. I mean, that whole sort of Saving Private Ryan fight sequence was just amazing. The dance number with Ryan. I mean, every single scene in this movie was so much fun. I mean, it was just such a colorful kind of collection of different sets, and even the way they get from Barbie Land to the real world, and the train to the plane to the boat to the the bike. It was just, everything was just so much fun. It's such a spectacle and so much fun to look at and be around.
Was there anything that was hard?
Yes, I mean, I think in general, convincing people in general that this wasn't a movie, a one-quadrant movie. It was a two-quadrant movie. I think in a lot of the early discussions, it was like, what is the comp for this movie? We've never seen a movie that could justify this budget. What are the female movies that actually work, that men are going to see? And I think, Greta had so much conviction. Like, I'm telling you, this movie's going to make $1 billion. I mean, she had so much conviction in her vision, and felt, that, she has a stepson, and she felt he would go see the movie. And I think, she just had so much clarity on her vision. But I think, there were obstacles about, the comps, and is this, going to be a 4-quadrant movie, and how do we get men to come see Barbie? And
when did that change? Like, when did people realize that you were right?
I think from, very early on when we screened the movie. I mean, first of all, it leaked out that it was going to be Barbie. And so, I mean, I've never come to a research screening where there are blocks and blocks of people just wearing pink, and it's going on and on. I'm like, oh my God, these people are all here for the Barbie preview. Wow, okay. But, I found myself sitting next to this dad and his 2 kids. I don't think he knew what he was getting himself into. This guy was belly laughing. He was talking to himself. He was like, this is the best movie ever. And so I feel like, going to those screenings and seeing just like that everybody was just cheering and screaming and excited. And it was just not just women. It was men. It was little girls. It was older, you know, it was older people. So it was pretty clear that there was something, you know, that felt very universal about the film.
So a lot of the film pokes fun at Mattel executives. So did you have to have any internal discussions with Mattel beforehand, and did they have any qualms about this aspect of the narrative?
I mean, look, certainly, I mean, I think the movie pokes fun at sort of corporate America. I think what was so great about Mattel is like we decided that we were going to be part of the joke, that we were going to be inside the joke, that we were going to laugh at ourselves, that if we weren't laughing at ourselves, that everybody else would be laughing at us. So I think at the beginning, everybody got, you know, sort of comfortable with being uncomfortable. And it became sort of like a joke, like, okay, yes, we're those people in the board, or those men in the boardroom, and you know, so we had fun with it. We leaned into it, and I think, you know, people just took it sort of in stride.
I love that. Thank you so much for your remarkable contribution to cinema and for the theatrical experience this year. And congratulations on your nominations.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Let's take a look at the clip from our next film, The Holdovers.
There was an incident when I was at Harvard with my roommate. And? He accused me of copying from his senior thesis, plagiarizing. Well, did you? No, he stole from me. That blue-blooded prick's family had allies on the faculty. I mean, their last name is on a library, for Christ's sake. So he accused me in order to sanitize his treachery, and they threw me out.
So you got kicked out of Harvard for cheating?
No, I got kicked out of Harvard for hitting him.
You hit him? What, like punched him out?
No, I hit him with a car.
You got kicked out of Harvard for hitting a guy with a car?
By accident. Pint of Jim Beam, please. But he broke 3 ribs, which was technically his fault because he shouldn't have been in the road.
$2, please.
Also, he shot himself, which was the greater indignity.
Here you go, killer.
Please welcome the nominated producer of The Holdovers, Mark Johnson.
There's only one chair.
There's only one chair because this movie only has one producer, which is pretty wild and rare these days.
I know.
I love that. How does it feel? Is it lonely at the top?
It is lonely. There's nobody. Listening to the 3 producers from American Fiction, I'm thinking that would have been nice if somebody else to turn to and say, what do you think? I'm actually very lucky because Alexander Payne is himself, I consider him a producer of the film. And then I also have somebody who works with me, Tom Williams, who's an executive producer on the film, who functions as a producer as well. So I wasn't entirely there on my own.
So that's who you lean on. Those are that you lean on those individuals when you're, you know, up to it. Okay, character-driven, story-based films are harder to get financed and often get categorized as small films. The Holdovers breaks this stereotype, I think. Can you speak about your first involvement and the conversations you had with Alexander Payne about this project?
Well, I guess you can say it's a small film. It's, you know what, and rather than say it's a character film, I think it is about characters, which is why we go to the movies, whether or not it's in a big canvas or a small canvas. It's about characters we can relate to or we can understand or we get a certain kind of emotion from. And those are the movies that Alexander makes. He and I did a movie just before this called Downsizing, which is a lot bigger and involved visual effects, and I don't think he'll ever go back there again. I think it really is about a handful of characters relating to one another. In this case, I started my career in 1982 with Diner, in which nothing happened, just a bunch of characters hanging out together. And I feel in many ways we're right back there because nothing really happens in the Holdovers, but I find it incredibly emotionally fulfilling, and apparently so does an audience.
Talk about your collaboration with Alexander and how it's evolved over the multiple movies that you've made together.
Well, I think every producer, she or he, loves the idea of working with a director who they have an ongoing relationship with. And I was lucky. I did my first 11 movies I did with Barry Levinson, and I did a bunch of things with Vince Gilligan and John Lee Hancock and a number of other directors, and we just keep working together. Obviously, there's a shorthand, and certain things. Most directors would just as soon not deal with the studio who's ever financing the movie. So they say, okay, you take care of that, and then also you can, when to step in and say something's not working, and why don't you take the, if necessary, we'll take the afternoon off and come back at it again in the morning. And the director, she or he, trusts you enough to know, oh, okay, Mark's got the movie in mind.
The ensemble is incredible. The three lead characters, portrayed by Paul Giamatti, Divine Joy Randolph, and Dominic Sessa, create such warmth and intimate and genuine connections with one another. Can you elaborate on the casting process and any magical moments you recall regarding their performances and collaborations with one another and the director?
It was a marvel to see. I think Alexander, to begin with, is very, very strong in casting, and he takes a lot longer than most directors in casting his movies. He knew from the moment he started this that he wanted to do it with Paul Giamatti, and there was no question. Every now and then somebody was thinking of financing it and say, what about this actor? He said, nope, it's Paul Giamatti, who he maintains is the best actor in America today. And then we had both, thank you. I'll pass that on. We had both seen Dolomite Is My Name, and we said, who is this actress? And then Divine had appeared in a number of television shows, and her work was always strong, but it was almost always comedy. And we said, this is not who this is. And met with her. He met with her several times, but she arrived at that character very much on her own, and that accent is entirely hers. She comes from very serious drama. She was at the Yale School of Drama, and she had been pigeonholed in a certain kind of comedy. And I think our jaws just truly fell open when first day she started to shoot, and we realized, oh my God, she has it. And then Dominic Sessa, Alexander will tell you that the casting director looked at close to 800 boys for the part, of which Alexander probably saw 100 of them. And then finally somebody had the great idea about, why don't we look at some of the boys who are at these schools we're scouting? And so the school that we shot a great deal of the movie in, it was made up of 6 different schools, but that's where Dominic Sessa was in school. He was last year there. And in fact, he was so smart, the first couple of days we shot in that school, and he said, I'm just going to stay in my dorm. Why do I need to be put up in a hotel? And, you worry, in this case, was he going to be able to do what he did when he first put himself on tape, and all of a sudden he's going to have 70 people looking down his tonsils and seeing if he can do it, and would he be able to do it on a consistent basis? And I have to say, I've never seen anybody, a first-time actor, be so confident and be able to do what he did. There's a very crucial scene after he's seen his father at a restaurant table, and he's talking about, who am I, and am I who he's going to be, and starting to really question his own worth. And it's a very long push-in, probably close to 3 minutes. And we thought, is he going to be able to do it? Is he going to be able to remember the lines, let alone do it? And what you see in the movie is the very first take. And so we had these 3 luminaries who just got along. And, some of the first stuff he started was Paul and Divine in the teacher's lounge when he tells Divine that how much he liked her son as a student. She said he hated you, thought you were a real asshole. And that was, we just started off with that stuff. And it's like they had been rehearsing or filming for 7 weeks already.
I love that. It's awesome. What is it about the decade of the 70s that was important for Payne, not just for the story to be set in the decade, but for the filmmaking itself to really evoke that period? Because the movie really does that.
Well, I think a lot of us love the movies of the 70s or fallen in love with everything from the paranoid thrillers of the 70s to the political intricacies of the films of the 70s. Alexander and I, too, are huge Hal Ashby fans. So we said, let's sort of make a Hal Ashby movie out of this, a little bit like The Last Detail. We see a lot of The Last Detail in the making of this. And then we said, well, why not just make it in the 70s? So much more interesting period. And those of you who make movies, as soon as cell phones get involved, it ruins all the plots because everything can be answered in about 5 minutes. But we loved the 70s aspect of it, and we wanted it to feel not just like a movie of the 70s, but a movie that had been made in the 70s and somehow left on a shelf, and somebody discovered it and say, oh, let's see what's here. And people think we shot it on film, which we take as a sort of badge of honor. We didn't. We shot it digitally, and then sort of distressed the image, and we put negative dirt on the image, and we also it's mixed. Nobody does it anymore. We mixed it in mono, and so no one's really questioned it. So it doesn't. We didn't want to be self-conscious, and we didn't want to be cute about it. We just wanted it to feel as though you were watching one of those movies you really enjoyed from the 70s.
Amazing. You've been producing and making films for over 4 decades now. Congratulations on your nomination, Mark Johnson.
It's a real honor.
Let's take a look at a clip from our next movie, Killers of the Flower Moon.
The Osage took their name from Missouri and Osage rivers. Niukanska, children of the Middle Waters. Move, said the great white father. There are many. So many hungry wolves. Can you find the wolves in this picture? Find the wolves in this picture?
Please welcome to the stage one of the producers of Killers of the Flower Moon, Daniel Lupi. I have so many questions to ask you, and we only have 10 minutes, so I'm just going to try to squeeze as many as I can. So tell us how you came to this project and your history with Scorsese and the script.
I got involved in 2020 when the film had actually, it kind of fallen apart at Paramount, and they were looking for a new financer. But going back in the history, the film about 10 years ago, Dan Freakin and Bradley Thomas optioned the book. They got Marty involved, and they hired Eric Roth to basically write a draft of the script. That draft was where Leo was basically playing the lead FBI who Jesse Plemons plays in the movie. And so what happened was that draft, Paramount got involved, were excited to make it. And then in 2019, Marty had gone down to Oklahoma to meet with the elders of the Osage Nation. And basically, him and Leo suddenly realized they were making the wrong movie. And so they changed it to where it was about Ernest and Molly.
And so what was the amount of involvement of the Osage Nation in making the movie?
More involved than I've ever been seen on a movie. I mean, basically, Marty would only make the movie if the Osage Nation were behind the project. So he basically went down. They had many meetings, as I said, with the nation. And, you know, in the making of it, you know, a lot of the films now tend to chase tax rebates. And in this one, it was, you know, we went to where the film took place. You know, there are scenes in the movie where actually, like the Dr. Schoen's office is actually the Dr. Schoen's office from 1920. I mean, it hasn't changed. I remember Jack Fisk, our designer, well, we were scouting earlier on, and we were in a museum and we found a phone book. And in the phone book was Ernest Burkhart's phone number from around the corner. I mean, it was just, you know, we were living history. And the Osage basically were with us hand in hand.
Did that permeate through like all the departments? Like how did that work?
From the very beginning, you know, we hired our heads of departments, and one of the driving forces was to go and engage with as many sort of indigenous craftsmen, from costume to construction to everything. You know, it was, we had about 500 people in Oklahoma. We were right in the middle of a pandemic. We were in Bartlesville, which is about 2 hours north of Tulsa. We were there about a year, and we truly sort of, you know, got involved with everyone. We had 8,000 extras. You know, most of the extras were Osage, you know, if they were, and then we had white extras from Tulsa and the surrounding neighborhoods. So it was.
Okay, so talk about that. Talk about how it was to shoot the movie at the height of the pandemic.
You know, it's interesting, and I think some of the other filmmakers will say the same thing. When it kept delaying us, so basically we'd left Paramount. COVID starts in, what was it, February, March, and the delays actually helped Marty with writing the script. I think it gave us a bit more prep, but you know, Apple Features basically ended up stepping in and financing the film, and in order for us to shoot, you know, we had a sort of an older director, we had older cast, and so there was a huge sort of worry about COVID and what that could do. So we ended up hiring an oil and gas firm to set up 2 labs in the middle of like in a field. And we did 75,000 COVID tests. and you literally couldn't meet anyone without being COVID tested. So we could turn a test around in an hour. And so it was a film in itself. COVID was.
I believe it. Jack Fisk built about 40 outdoor sets on location for the production, which is incredible. It was also his first time working on a production helmed by Scorsese. What was the experience like working with Jack on these sets, and were there any scenes that were memorable or particularly difficult to shoot?
Well, Jack Fisk, you know, his background, he'd done The New World with Malick, he'd done The Revenant with Inarritu, he'd done There'll Be Blood with me. And so basically coming into this of times was like the perfect, I mean, he was the guy. So Jack is more like a forensic production designer. I mean, I remember it used to drive me crazy because he literally would be down looking at the death records and the sort of property, you know, going back. I mean, what he did with the film was probably drag us all into what really happened. You know, the Osage, there was, in the opening of the movie, for who's seen it, there's a black and white clip where basically what happened was in 1910 or early 1900s, they find the biggest oil and gas find on their land. And so they became, per capita, the richest people in the world. And, you know, there's a little bit in there where you talk about, you know, if you run out of gas, just go and buy another car. You know, that was, yes, that happened, but for the most part, the Osage were not that showy. And so what Jack did is he basically, you know, like Molly's house in Fairfax and the houses we built on the plains were, that was historically correct. So he's incredibly much about detail.
How was the idea? Yes, exactly. Right. How was the idea conceived for the ending to be set out through a stage-produced radio drama?
So what happened was, what's interesting is I think American Fiction said they were on they shot it in 25 days. Well, on day 100, we actually, COVID spiked and we decided to leave to end. We were like, all right, you know what, we'll Marty, we were meant to shoot the that scene in a movie theater in Pawhuska, and so we delayed it. So what happened was Marty had watched when the FBI started. They actually had radio plays where they would talk about how great the FBI was doing, and actually one of the stories was the Osage murders. And so Marty was like, you know what, that would be a great way to end it. And so we actually went back to New York and he shot it in his old high school in the Bronx. And so that scene, and then, you know, if you saw in it, as Jack White is in it, it's yes. So he wanted to end it in that kind of wrap up as opposed to having, you know, words on a screen saying this is what happened. I mean, I think, and also, you know, Marty was never meant to be in the film, you know, so that ending moment, I think he kind of felt like he couldn't think of anyone better to kind of say those words. I mean, it meant a lot to him, do you know what I mean? Because basically she died and there was no mention of the murders or anything. I mean, it was like history was whitewashed. You know, actually talking about history, something we did find, which was interesting, if you, again, in the film, you'll see that the Tulsa Massacre happened at the same time that we were making the movie. And what was fascinating was, you know, 2 hours north, there was the Osage murders where no one knew about this story until the book came out. Or maybe if they did, I don't think people knew. And then the Tulsa Massacre was, or actually, I think there's different words about Tulsa Massacre, Tulsa riots. It happened exactly the same time. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. I can't believe we're out of time.
Well, thank you, everyone.
Congratulations, Daniel, on your nomination.
Thank you. And I do just need to say that there were 3 other producers in the film. Do you know what I mean? Which was important. I mean, there was you know, Bradley Thomas, Dan Friedkin, and Martin Scorsese. And without them, couldn't have made the film.
Absolutely. Congratulations to all the nominees. Let's take a look at a clip from our next film, Maestro. Please welcome to the stage two of the nominated producers for Maestro, Fred Brenner and Amy Durning.
Oh, I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait.
So you first started working on this project back in 2008, which means you've spent about 15 years on this movie. What was it about this story that had your interest and dedication all these years?
You know, it's a number that I don't know if I should be proud of it or embarrassed by it for 15 years. You know, Leonard Bernstein captured my imagination first at a young people's concert in New York when I was a kid. I think the other thing that I learned the deeper we got into investigating Leonard Bernstein was that he embodied so many innate conflicts that resonate through all of our lives. You know, I mean, I'll screw it up, but there was a great lecture series that he did where he was asked if he was gay or if he was straight or if he was a composer or if he was a conductor or if he did classical music or he did popular music or if he was an Orthodox Jew or an atheist. And he basically said, and I paraphrase, I don't really know what the question is anymore. I only know that the answer is yes. And I thought that was pretty intriguing and would make for a great movie. And I think that so philosophically, that's where I was coming from. And I think the other part was that there is an element of show business that I think was sort of irresistible, which is that if we could embody this electrifying human being in all of his theatricality and all of his appetite and all of his zeal for life and put that on a really, really big screen, it would be irresistible if we got it right. And with Bradley, I think we got it right.
Amy, how did you get involved in the project?
So Fred and I have been partners for more than 15 years now. And everything he said is correct. That's how we came to it, the psychology, the man, all of his sort of boundless energy and artistry. And then there were these other elements too. There's the music, there's his champion of music, of artistry. There's New York right after World War II, where it's becoming the sort of center of the world artistic space because Europe is obviously in shambles. And it just had this breadth that, you know, we just always knew that if we could get the angle right and the collaboration right, that we would excite, you know, artists at the top of their field and department heads. And we just knew that it would pull people to it, just like, you know, Ben said from American Fiction. And so that's why we went after it.
Bradley Cooper wore many hats in this film, many, many, many hats. He starred in the film, co-wrote it, directed the film, produced the film. Can you take us to the beginning days of his involvement and how that came about?
Sure, it was extremely exciting. We had been developing the movie with Martin Scorsese for many, many years.
And Josh Singer.
And Josh Singer, who had written it. And we had gone through a number of drafts, but we were working along pretty well. Marty ended up going off and, thank you, could do Killers of the Flower Moon, as well as other films. And so for a variety of reasons having to do with options and music rights and all of those things that we need to hold on to and make work, Steven Spielberg got interested in it. He was doing West Side Story, and that was a function of Josh Singer, who had written the post for Steven, and he was in the process of doing West Side Story. So Josh and Steven began talking a little bit about the script. There was a moment there, and by the way, this is a luminary group of producers that Amy and I are deeply honored and privileged to be in the company of, and the other one is Christy McCosco-Krieger, who you know, and a superlative producer and wonderful collaborator. So it sort of started to attract, and again, relative to the conversation you were having, this kind of alchemy of people who all, as Amy said, were attracted to wanting to tell this story for a variety of reasons. Steven, I think, entertained the notion for a minute, had the idea that Bradley Cooper would be a really interesting piece of casting and would be a great Leonard Bernstein. I think.
And Bradley told him he was right.
Not only did he tell me he was right, he said, and by the way, if you decide not to direct it, I'd really like to throw my hat into the ring because this is a story and a man and this is material I'm all over. It began a long process. The first meeting I had with Bradley was it'll take me 4 years to make a movie, and I've directed a lot of television, so on some level that seemed like an awfully long time, but the years came, the years went, COVID came, COVID went. The first text I got of Bradley and a picture of Leonard Bernstein side by side. They were twins separated at birth and then became this phenomenal immersion, both vocally, physically, in terms of the knowledge, the music, and we were off and running, and that became sort of the final and successful act of the development of the movie.
This film is as much about Felicia, Leonard's wife, played by Carey Mulligan, who's remarkable, as much as it is about Leonard Bernstein. Was this always the case, and how did the creative process evolve to focus on this part of their life?
Yeah. In the sense of Lenny's journey of who he was as a man, the answer is yes, and his struggles with, as an artist, popular, composing, conducting, his struggles as an entertainer, right? He was the first one to be on TV, so all of a sudden he had a level of celebrity that was just off the charts. You know, there was no map for it. And there was always this idea that Felicia and the family in some way grounded him. There was always whispers of that in the original scripts, in Josh's writing, and our discussions about how it was part of their relationship that allowed him to continue to ask those questions. But it wasn't nearly the lens through which we explored the human being that ended up being on screen is what you see now. That really came, I think, from Bradley approaching the directing as an actor, which some of you may know Fred did Pollock with Ed Harris, so he had had that experience before. I had never had that experience before, working with an actor as a director. And it was very different. And the way he approached story came through his exploration, and it just landed like a laser on the relationship.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about that, to the same point, is that with all of the research that we did, and all of the research that Josh did, and all of the years that it took for us to curate all of these amazing events in Leonard Bernstein's life, once Bradley decided that the story that he felt he really wanted to take and to tell, and the lens through which he wanted to tell it, was that marriage.
Yeah.
And the rest of it sort of it's refracted through that. I mean, we go through many, many decades, you know, of immigration, anti-Semitism, you know, popular culture. All of those things are there, and they're in the fabric of the movie, but they're not really what the movie's about. So all of that research sort of lands in the story, but the story is completely told, and I think beautifully told, and emotionally told, because that's ultimately, I think, where we, you know, Bradley has sort of a divining rod for the truth, that emotional truth, and will not be denied. And that...
and I'd also say, too, she wasn't that easy to find. Like, there's not a lot of Felicia research. There's not a lot of Felicia. You have to go to the Library of Congress and watch something that they won't let go just to see her. So they did that work, and they went in and they found her, and Carrie went to Chile, and they started that journey.
Okay, last question. So having been fortunate enough to make a movie with Bradley, I know he has a pretty unique and thorough editorial and post-process. So I'd love you to tell us a little bit about that on this movie.
I have never seen anything like it
Me neither.
in my life. And I think the movie is beautiful and benefits from it. It's a unique talent, which is, like I said, there's a divining rod that holds the emotional truth of the movie sacrosanct, right? But there is a collaborative spirit which is undeniable and incredibly sort of bizarre, really, in terms of, you know, the many different directors we've had the opportunity to work with. There's very often a very clear vision. There always is a clear vision. But the interesting thing about Bradley's work, particularly in post-production, is he's willing to listen, he's willing to try, he will try anything, he will try a note from someone who isn't necessarily somebody who is in the inner circle. He will try all the notes from those of us who are in the inner circle. Ultimately, he will make the decision that he feels lands the movie in the way that he will always say, the movie will tell me what to do. And everybody else can join that conversation. You're free to be in that conversation. But ultimately, the movie tells you what it's going to do.
And it's a long conversation. And I'd also say that more often than not, after all of those, all of the efforts and the collaboration, he would often land on the first choice. And that was actually very cool for me, too, to see that.
Thank you both so much. Congratulations on your nomination.
Thank you.
Let's take a look at a clip from our next film, Oppenheimer.
The important thing isn't can you read music, it's can you hear it? Can you hear the music, Robert?
Yes, I can. Our bodies, mostly empty space. Groupings of tiny energy waves bound together. I'm teaching something no one here has dreamt of. But once people start hearing what you can do with it, there's no going back.
Robert, we've given them an ace. It's for them to play the hand. Oh, you keep me informed. As best I can. The world will remember this day.
Do you understand what I'm getting at?
I do.
And why don't you answer it that
Because
way?
I don't like your phrase.
He'd do it all over. Why? Because it made him the most important man who ever lived. When I came to you with those calculations, we thought we might start a chain reaction that would destroy the entire world.
Please welcome to the stage the magnificent Emma Thomas. Hi.
Hello there.
How you doing?
Good, thank you. This is fun. I'm
It is
enjoying
fun.
hearing all. I mean, I'm intrigued about Bradley Cooper's post-production process.
Oh, okay. It's a good one. We could have spent the entire night talking about Bradley Cooper's post-production process. But we're going to talk about Oppenheimer. So you have such an extensive array of experiences in producing large-scale films, and Oppenheimer is another creation of yours and Nolan's. Were there any distinguishing elements that you personally experienced as the producer that were different from the previous big-budget projects on which you've collaborated?
Gosh. Well, this one, there were a couple of things that were quite hard about this project, which I don't know that I knew going, well, okay. The first one was fairly obviously hard, I think, because I felt like, with most of the films that we've made, we always try and push things. We want to do something that we haven't done before. And with many of the other films that we've made, we were doing sort of big effects or sort of logistically very hard things that, felt very challenging to me. This one, when I read the script, did not feel that. I knew that we could do all the stuff. I felt very good about all of that. And so really it was more about the sort of creative challenges of the movie and the challenges of making a movie like this and putting it out into the world, and making it commercial, because Chris was very clear that, and I think that there's a world in which you could have made a story like this very small, on a sort of small scale, but Chris was very clear he wanted to make it sort of a large scale, he never invoked the name David Lean, but it was very much like he wanted it to be epic in scale. He felt like this was a story that had very sort of big implications for the world, and he wanted to tell it big. So that was very sort of nerve-wracking for me. And then, the money. It was hard to make a film this ambitious for the money that we had, I would say.
So just jumping off from that, I think everyone has a notion that when you make giant movies with a lot of money, that there are no budget problems. So tell us why that's not true.
Well, I would say that if, as a producer, and as for directors too, I think that if you feel you have enough money, you're not doing your job right. And the reason for that for me is that you should always be trying to be ambitious. You should always be trying to put every dollar on the screen. And certainly in the world that we've worked in, and we've had some big budgets. This was not one of the bigger ones. It wasn't the smallest, but it definitely was a very ambitious film for the amount of money that we had. And I don't think we've ever felt like, oh yeah, this is easy. And it shouldn't feel easy. It just shouldn't.
At what point do you deal with that in the process? Is it during the script stage, or is it once you really start prepping the movie in terms of how much you've got to make it?
Well, we have a probably an unusual sort of process in which that has developed over time, but basically we don't have a deal at any particular studio, and every project that we've ever made, we've sort of gone out with, and we've gone out saying, this is the script, this is how we want to make it, and this is the amount of money we think we need to make it for. And usually we make that sort of decision fairly early on before we have budgeted, but we always make it thinking this is the right amount of money if we want to work again, or if we we want people to want to work with us. And I would say that Oppenheimer was the first one. Well, Dunkirk was similar in as much as we came up with the amount, and then we had to do it, and it was really hard because that was a very, very complex film for the amount of money we had. And Oppenheimer, I felt was going to be easier because it was kind of it was the same amount of money as Dunkirk, and I was like, there's no Spitfires, there's no, ships or whatever. But unfortunately, the environment that we were in when we made the film was one where things were really expensive. It was, right after the pandemic, costs were so high. And plus, of course, there was the ambition of making the film. Chris was clear from the beginning that he wanted to make it on large format. That's it's not prohibitively expensive. We did it, but it is an expense,
What led to that decision, that specific decision, and why?
Very specifically, it was entirely about the scope, Again, this is, as I said, I think this is a film that you could have made very small, but I think that he just felt like he wanted to make it in the biggest way possible. He felt very strongly that if you're going to sort of, again, going back to sort of David Lean, it's like if you're talking about like Lawrence of Arabia, that is a very singular man in the middle of sort of broad movements in history. And this was a similar sort of story. It's like, and it was so fun, like shooting hair and makeup tests and doing a very different sort of film on IMAX that you're not used to seeing on those huge screens. But I think immediately it sort of set the tone for the sort of the importance of the story and obviously the scope.
So I know you've been asked this question over and over again, but I'm still going to ask it in case anyone hasn't had the answer, and also specific to this project. But what is the process and how you and Chris work together and collaborate, starting sort of in the beginning all the way through? And obviously he's a producer too. So how does that work with the two of you?
There's no real, I think that one of the fantastic things about not only, somebody earlier on was saying that, you look for, it's great when you work with a director that you've worked with before, and the sort of the shorthand is fantastic. Obviously, we're also married, which also is helpful because it means that, you have no agenda other than making the best film you possibly can. And the process is, generally speaking, Chris is an absolute workaholic. He works harder than anyone I know. He's a great producer as well as a great director and writer. He is not happy unless he is either planning to be on a set or cutting what he shot on a set. And he is, so generally the process is I'm like, I'm a little slower to want to go back to work and be like, come on, really? And it actually really works well because it means that like there's this sort of push-pull where he kind of has to convince not only himself but also me. And I just feel like when he's ready, there's a moment where I see that he's ready and that the script is ready and that the movie is the right one to make, and and then we go, and it's kind of slightly a cottage industry. It always feels like, because oftentimes these things, even whatever the scale of the movies, oftentimes the conversations are starting over the breakfast table. Do you know what I mean? I think that we sort of work, particularly in prep. He is very much a producer. He's a producer during the shoot too, but in prep he's very much sort of on the same page as me, and on this film we had Chuck Roven too. When we shoot, I think that the roles slightly shift, and I find myself sort of protecting his space a little bit more and taking on some of the producerial stuff that he does not have the capacity for when he's shooting a movie. He doesn't look at hot costs, for example. So the sort of things shift a little bit over the course of the movie, but generally we have a sort of a great a great sharing of agenda, basically. I.e., there are none other than just a great movie.
Okay, final question. What is it you love about what you do?
I think for me, it's a little bit what you were saying earlier on. I love that I am on a project at the very beginning and I'm on at the very end. And the more movies we make, the more I realize, oh no, their lives go on forever. Like, a movie isn't done when it, comes out in theaters or whatever. It goes on forever. And I think that there's something about the sort of I don't know, it's almost like a parental thing. Nurturing a project from beginning to end is really magic. And I love that most of the time I'm not only looking at the sort of nitty-gritty, but I'm also thinking about the sort of the 30,000-foot view of what a movie can be beyond the issues that we're dealing with on any given day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your nomination. Let's take a look at our next film, Past Lives.
근데 이번에 와서 확인한 사실은 넌 너기 때문에 떠나가야 했어. 그리고 내가 널 좋아한 이유는 네가 너이기 때문이야. 그리고 넌 누구냐면 떠나는 사람인 거야.
너가 기억하는 나영이는 여기에 존재하지 않아.
알아.
근데 그 어린애는 존재했어. 너 앞에 앉아있지는 않지만 그렇다고 없는 거는 아니야. 20년 전에 난 그 애를 너와 함께 두고 온 거야.
알아. 그리고 그때 내가 겨우 12살이었지만 그 애를 사랑했었어.
또라이네.
Please welcome to the stage the producers of Past Lives, Christine Vachon, Pamela Kafla, and David Hinojosa. Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome. So Celine Song had her filmmaking debut with Past Lives, and you're all experts at working with first-time filmmakers. So how did this project come to you? And what do you generally look for in a first-time director? And what was it specifically that you saw in Celine?
All right. So it was 2021, and the pandemic had gotten to a point where independent productions could start again. And we got a phone call about Past Lives, and what was really remarkable about it is David had been with Killer Films for 10 years. He had left during the pandemic to start 2 a.m. We were all in a lot of transition and a lot of uncertainty. And I had reached out to an agent at CAA, Sue Carls, and just said, send me your best stuff. I just want to read great scripts. And one of them, this was in 2020, the summer of 2020, was Past Lives. So when David called us and said, so, you know, I'm at 2 a.m. and this project needs a producer, it's called Past Lives, I was like, wow, that's crazy, because it was really one of the most phenomenal scripts I had really ever read, and certainly read in that time. So it had its cast, it had its studio, it was A24, and it needed experienced producers because, to your point, Celine's a first-time filmmaker. So that's how we all came to Past Lives, and I'll let someone else talk about the first-time filmmaker thing, because we've all done that a lot, actually.
I mean, I think when we decide whether or not a first-time filmmaker is somebody we want to take a chance on, because it is a risk, and but part of the joy of it is first-time filmmakers are never cynical. And being around that, around what they bring to the set, that sort of extraordinary sense of they're finally getting to tell the story they've waited their whole lives to tell, in a way, you know, stops us from becoming cynical. And Celine, it was very clear very quickly that while she didn't know her way around a film set, she really knew how to tell her story.
I love that. Are there any red flags that ever come up with when you're meeting with a first-time filmmaker that make you pass on that?
I mean, it's not so much in a meeting. Christine and I and David actually have talked about this a lot. If a filmmaker doesn't have a significant relationship with another human at all,
we call it our test.
Maybe
you
we
have a
should-
relationship with another living thing.
Right. Actually, living thing. I think it's not even a
Plants
human.
count, kind of.
Talk about the differences working with a first-time feature director from the producing point of view. Like, how does your job specifically change?
I think because the three of us have worked together so well and developed a rhythm of kind of passing the ball, I think a lot about rhythms in the process. We were able to kind of link arms and create a sort of really fun boot camp in a way. And to Christine's point, there was just no cynicism. So it was really one of the first things, I think, after lockdown and really existentially questioning whether we'd ever be on a set again, to really be back and do that. It really felt fun. And I think for the crew whom we were so fortunate to work with, people think back on it in such a positive way, such a magical experience. So I think it was truly new for Celine, but it felt fresh and new for us because there was this sort of unplanned pause.
So were there any further developments made to the script before production, or did you shoot the original script that you read?
We shot the original script. I mean, there might have been minor things, but it was a crystalline gem when we read it, and that was the blueprint for the production.
That's amazing. The film was shot in 25 days, a remarkably short period of time for a feature film. Given the tight shooting schedule, can you talk about some of the main challenges during production, and how did you creatively problem solve them?
I talk about the challenge of language a lot, and we were embarrassingly far into the process for me before I really absorbed.
I think for all of us.
Okay, good. That I really absorbed that none of us speak Korean and how much of the script is in Korean. And so when you're on set and you're on the monitor and you have your sides and you're following along, I found for me it was always almost like a karaoke, because you would, like the bouncing beach ball, you'd have to follow along from the minute the take started. Otherwise, you wouldn't know where you were in the scene. And you'd have to wait until the next take to start again and like really stay with them. So I've never been more plugged in to the monitor and my sides following everything along, because I couldn't recover if I lost it.
How did you deal with the portions of the movie that were shot in South Korea? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, we had a production services company, fantastic one. One of our partners, our big picture partners, is CJ in Korea. So really great footprint of an established company there. And it was remarkably like any other shoot that has sort of, a first unit, which was the New York unit, and then Korea was second. You have your team, you start prepping. It's a huge time zone, so you get in the rhythm of, 10 o'clock at night, we're gonna have our morning call. And you just sort of get a sense of what are the idiosyncrasies of shooting somewhere else that we need to know about and be prepared for, and what are the same things everywhere, which are so many things about film production. Unfortunately, because of COVID and a variety of reasons, neither of us were able to go to Korea. There was an enormous, I think it was still a 10-day quarantine period, really rigorous testing, different quarantine in Korea than in New York. You were kind of put somewhere else as opposed to a hotel. So we managed it from afar and watched the dailies with just, wonder at what they were able to achieve.
When did you all know that you had something special?
I mean, it's easy to say, that screening at Sundance, obviously, which was just seeing an audience react to the movie in such an emotional way. But I think I think, you know, David, you actually tell a good story, which you should tell about being on set and realizing how little coverage we were doing.
Yeah, I thought the great thing about Q&As is you have to like go back and like, I go through my like photo gallery. I'm like, what was I doing that day, or like where was I sitting? And we remembered this. If you've seen the movie, there's a moment where you're in Dumbo Park in New York, facing Manhattan, and there's a crane shot, and the two characters are speaking, and it sort of lowers slowly, and it goes through the trees, and then you meet them at the perfect moment, and they're having this deep conversation. And Christine and I are sitting at monitor and probably eating snacks and like kind of engaging all of a sudden, and I go, there's no coverage. We kept doing it over and over again, and we weren't cutting in or building any other way to go into the scene, which was kind of a remarkable act of confidence from Celine to think, I know exactly how this is going to play. And so in the moment, it was very scary, but I also felt, oh, I think that we're dealing with someone who has such a precise idea of what they're executing.
And I would add to that when I thought there was really something special here really was the script stage. The script was so good. It was once in a very long time level good. You know, we all read a lot of scripts and we have to make movies, and some are fantastic, some are really good, some get there, some you're kind of like, I hope the execution elevates it. This one was a wow kind of script. Confident, cinematic, thematic, narrative. It just had it all, and I never know when we're shooting what we have. I just don't have that ability to perceive like, oh, the dailies, I know they're going to cut together so beautifully. It was the script and then the first cut that were so powerful, and we're just so lucky.
Okay, final question for each of you individually. What does the nomination mean to you personally? Not to the movie, but to you personally. David, you can start.
I am really tickled that my parents get to be here and experience it, because they don't know a ton about Hollywood. I'm from Indiana, and they know what the Oscars are, and so that was cool, them getting to experience that with me.
I guess for me, it's 30 years of working on a certain kind of really challenging movie and never wavering from that kind of filmmaking. It's just what I love. It's the movies I love. Never expected to get rich from it. I only expected to just be lucky enough to maybe do it again, and to be in cinema history now. Like, this will follow us forever in a good way. It's really moving, and I don't think I've totally processed it, actually, still.
I mean, besides what took you so damn long?
Besides that?
I mean, you know, going off on what they both said, I mean, I'm so thrilled that David's parents are here, because both Pam and I's are long gone, and this is, you know, it helps us sort of anchor and remember like what that would have meant to them. Yeah, as Pam said, it's just so great to, you know, after like this, you know, these weeks of since the nomination, of just feeling like we get to be part of such an extraordinary legacy. And it may never happen again, but, you know, here we are.
All three of you have been and are unbelievable champions of independent films and independent filmmakers. Congratulations on your nomination. Let's take a look at the clip from our next movie, Poor Things.
There is a world to enjoy, traverse, circumnavigate. Let us do this. Understand, me never lived outside God's house. What? So Bella's so much to discover. I have adventured it and found nothing but sugar and violets.
Oh.
It is most charming. So I am your creation. I am finding being alive fascinating, so I'll forgive you the act.
I am really getting my steps in tonight. Please welcome the producers of Poor Things, Andrew Lowe and Ed Guiney. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
So, Poor Things is based on the novel by Alistair Gray. You've both worked with Yorgos for about a decade now. When did the idea for an adaptation of the novel first develop? And was Yorgos able to discuss the project with Alistair before his passing?
Well, we first met Yorgos on the back of the success he enjoyed with Dogtooth, so that was nominated for Best Foreign Language Film. And he came to London because he decided he wanted to work in the English language. And at the time, we connected with him and attached him to a project that became The Favourite. So that was around 2012. And he'd already read the book and he was interested in it. And he had separately just sort of reached out and connected with Alistair Gray. And he then eventually invited Yorgos to come meet him in Glasgow. And for those of you who've read the book is originally set in Glasgow. And they spent a couple of hours wandering around the city and Alistair pointing out to him all the key locations that feature in the book. And at the, as Yorgos tells it, at the end of this this sort of odyssey through the city, Alistair turned to him and said, "Well, you seem like a nice young man. I'm very happy for you to have my book." So that he gave him his blessing. And we then, as we were developing The Favourite, he pitched us this idea to make this other film, which became The Lobster. And so we started with The Lobster, The Killing of Sacred Deer, and The Favourite. And by the time we got to make The Favourite, we connected with Tony McNamara, who co-wrote on The Favourite. And Yorgos asked him to take on Poor Things. And yeah, the rest is history.
How does the experience working on this film with Yorgos differ from the other movies?
Excuse me. Well, there's a few things that were really different. One is that it was the first time he'd ever shot on a soundstage. So he'd never done that before. And also, it was the first time he really lit a movie. I mean, he had used lights, but he tends not to, or he'll kind of only use them very sparingly, like nighttime exteriors. And even on The Favourite, we just had loads and loads of candles, you know. So he's not particularly keen, but because obviously we're shooting on sound stages, we had to light, and we went, you know, from kind of one extreme to another, not having built any sets or done anything like that, or having lit. He took up 6 sound stages in Budapest, and I think at one point we had all the lights in Hungary and most of the lights in Germany up on the roof, because we had to rent them before we built the sets, because we couldn't put them up after, so you had to put the lights up first and then build the sets. And that was very expensive.
What do you guys think is the secret to maintaining an ongoing relationship with a director?
I mean, Yorgos is someone we've worked with multiple times. He's not the only director. You know, Lenny Abramson is another director, Irish director we've worked with on all his films. And I think over time, you know, we have learned really just to adapt and lean into whatever works. And with every director, it's very different. And in the case of Yorgos, I think we have learned to try and build a kind of tribe of people who are, you know, around him who he trusts, and try and do repeat business as much as possible. So Robbie Ryan was our cinematographer, and he shot The Favourite for us as well. And increasingly, we've shot another film with Yorgos since Poor Things. And so we've tried to use the same heads of department as much as possible. And I think that's a key thing. And, you know, it's a feature of how Yorgos likes to work. He has this, you know, great vision for what he wants to make, but he's actually very trusting of the people he surrounds himself with. And many of the heads of department on Poor Things were doing it for the first time, really, at this sort of level. The sort of, you know, they never made a film at this scale before. And Yorgos very much kind of just lets them get on with it. He doesn't give them too much direction, really. And that was particularly the case. I mean, you just heard the beautiful score playing over the trailer, Jermaine Fendricks. Not only is he first time, you know, composer, he just never done anything in film before. I mean, Yorgos has heard his debut album and thought, oh, he could be good. And then he got him to score the film. So, and that's a feature of Yorgos. He's really brilliant at talent spotting and encouraging people to do their best work.
Emma Stone not only stars in the film, but she's also a producer on the movie. Can you talk about how she came to be involved in the project in this capacity and what that experience was like for the two of you?
We produced the movie with Emma and with Yorgos. It happened really organically. I think she and Yorgos obviously met on The Favourite and had a great time, and there was a meeting of minds. And I think soon afterwards they were having dinner and talking about what they were both doing next. And Yorgos sort of talked about Poor Things. But I don't think he was necessarily pitching it. He was just talking about it. And she was like, I love it. I want in. And of course, when Emma Stone says that to you, there's only one answer. And that began a conversation. And that was probably before we had a script, probably before Tony had written the script. But Emma's sort of an all-in person. It's sort of 100% in. And so the kind of her interest in playing the part expanded into an interest in all aspects of the movie and a curiosity around all aspects of the film. And it also sort of coincided with COVID a bit. So there was a lot more time for conversation, if you like. You know, there was more time for kind of talking and thinking about things. And she's incredibly helpful, obviously, around so many aspects of you know, the script, you know, script development, casting, and then this natural curiosity. So it's sort of, it just seemed to make sense that we would involve her. And it's also may not have escaped people's notice that myself and Andrew and Yorgos and Tony, who wrote the script, are all men of a certain age. So we thought it would be a very good idea to have, you know, Bella's voice in the middle of the whole thing. And the other thing about Emma is that actually she has worked on much bigger movies than any of us have worked on. And it was by far the biggest thing that we had ever done. And she's been involved in putting big movies out into the world. You know, an actor of that caliber is intimately involved in so many decisions, particularly someone with her curiosity and her kind of, and her intelligence. So it sort of was this kind of producing brain trust, the four of us, which was very functional, and very, you know, she was very important at so many stages. And then when it came to kind of post-production and putting the film out in the world and the kind of movie that it is, it was really important to have her voice around that. And we felt really, because of the SAG strike, we also felt quite vulnerable going out, you know, to Venice without her alongside us, because she obviously couldn't be part of that, but was very much watching attentively at all the kind of micro details.
Now that you mentioned Venice, tell us about the experience of waiting for the reaction from the first screening.
Oh yeah, I told the story the other day. Yeah, it's well, it was. I mean, the film, you know, it's a thing, right? And it was kind of rocky enough, you know. It was sort of, you know, trying to find it and figure out where to put it and where the best place was. And so, like, we were nervous before it premiered at Venice. And I was with a colleague having coffee down the back streets, knowing that the press and industry screening was on. And the way it works is that if you have your screening at nighttime, in one of those film festivals, in the morning you have the press and industry screening. That's really for press, and the reactions are all embargoed, and the journalists aren't supposed to tweet or say anything like that. But they do tell the publicists what they think of the movie as they come out. So I had my phone on the table, anxiously waiting. It was coming up to around 11 o'clock when I expected the film to be over. And Rebecca Keary, who's the head of international distribution at Searchlight, her name came pulsing on my phone. And I ran down the side street and she just said, I said, so what? And she just said, it's okay, we're going to be okay. And that was like, but it was really a lot. I mean, I phoned Andrew then and it was like, oh, wow. Because it's not that the other reactions, but if that first screening, if it's like, they like, you're kind of, which you could have been, right? I mean,
Congratulations to you both on your nominations. Thank you so much for being here. It was very quick. I know, it goes so fast. Let's take a look at the clip from our next film, The Zone of Interest.
Die herrliche Zeit, die wir im gastlichen Hause verlebten, wird immer mit zu müssen, schönsten Urlaub Erinnerungen gehören. Im Osten steht unser Morgen. Habt herzlichen Dank für eure nationalsozialistische Gastfreundschaft. Und das, ich weiß nicht, Gilly, Billy und das.
Please welcome to the stage the producer of The Zone of Interest, James Wilson. You are last up.
Z.
So this is the second time you've produced a feature with director Jonathan Glazer. How would you describe your collaboration in developing a project? And what were the challenges of this particular film?
Yes, it's he's only made 4 films, so it's the second time. I've actually known and worked with John for longer than that. I worked on his first film, Sexy Beast, but not as a producer. I was an executive at that time. So I've known John for a long time, 26 years. That was 1999 we shot that. So what was it like developing it? That was more the development part of it?
Developing and getting this one made.
Well, we developed it on our own, so for a number of years. So it came out of conversations that went on for a while. I would say probably a year or 2, maybe, about a film about this subject. I suppose the subject being, I suppose you could say the Holocaust, or you might say like the Nazi project. But yeah, I suppose the Holocaust. But John's process. And, I was hearing Emma say this about Chris, and he's sort of almost obsessed with doing things that, or trying to reach for something that is unprecedented and hasn't been done before. I'm sure lots of filmmakers have that kind of criteria, but John certainly has it in a very sort of rigorous way. So one thing about doing a Holocaust film, a period film, is of course there's this sort of huge pantheon of films and tropes of Holocaust films, and I guess at the top of that mountain is Schindler's List, and there's all sorts of other films in between across the spectrum of films, Son of Saul, Night and Fog, and so John's thing was about, well, what is that? How do you say something interesting? How do you ask interesting questions? What might those be that hasn't been done before, and sort of speaks to me as a filmmaker, and I guess by association as therefore an audience in a sort of a different way. So we were reading and a lot of history, stories, novels, thinking about ideas, and then at a certain point John read a preview of the novel, this novel called The Zone of Interest by Marie-Ange, and it wasn't a review, it was a sort of, one of those short things, and I think it was in The Observer in the UK. We're both London-based, and it described this novel, which was set in a Nazi concentration camp, but was partly from the point of view of the commandant and his family. It wasn't Auschwitz. It was a fictional concentration camp. It was fictional characters. It wasn't completely from that point of view. It had multiple points of view, but there was something about the description of that perspective that was like a sort of, that was the spark. That was a kind of the lightning duct of an idea, and it seemed like that perspective, that perpetrator perspective, which was sort of unexpected when you think about the way the Holocaust is typically narrated, which is typically about victims, right, or perhaps saviors, or maybe there are perpetrator characters in them, but you're not with them the whole time. There seemed to be something instantly interesting about that in terms of like a sort of frame of how to look at something, to put us in the perpetrator perspective. So briefly, and I'm compressing a period of years and years and years, this was in 2014. So we read the book, we optioned it at the end of 2014, and then we set about thinking about how to adapt it. It was just me and him, and we started working with a researcher. We worked with an amazing woman called Lucy Pardy, who we worked with before, who's also an amazing casting director. We started to research the background to Amos's book, which, as I say, is fictional. And the novel, there's nothing in the film that is in the novel other than the title, which isn't, I suppose, in the film. But the book is, but there are no characters or events that are the same. And there's one line in the book that we transposed into a line in the film. But otherwise, it's completely different. And but it was the inspiration for sure. Amos gave us the point of view, the perspective. But what happened is that in starting to research what clearly were part of the background that Martin Amos must have looked at for the novel, which was that it was clearly loosely based on Auschwitz. It's not, the novel isn't a fictionalization of Rudolf Höss and Hedwig Höss, but it's clearly an approximation of the book. The story in the book is actually of a sort of a marital triangle. So the commandant's wife is having an affair with a IG Farben executive, and the commandant becomes obsessed with that. And we thought about that for a very short amount of time, and John very quickly dismissed that of like, I don't want to make a film in which Auschwitz is sort of the backdrop for a story. And then in researching it, and we were doing this in London through reading, and then we went to Auschwitz and visited, we almost immediately, before in fact we went to Poland, we came across the real characters, the real commandant, Rudolf Höss, and his wife Hedwig, and the life they lived. I suppose probably the most kind of, the sort of second sort of epiphany after the idea of the book was there are about like a dozen photographs that exist. You can find them on the internet of the house, and mainly of the garden actually. So the pool, the paddling pool, the pagoda, the toys, the kids. There's a sort of really extraordinary photograph, all of which was in this kind of extraordinary kind of build that we did. We made the film in Auschwitz, right next to the camp. So we built the garden and grew the garden and rebuilt a kind of a derelict house right next to Auschwitz, and as a kind of facsimile of what was in those photographs. But seeing those photographs in which their garden wall, just as is depicted in the film, it abuts the camp, is right next to it. So on one side is the sort of concrete walls with the sort of palisades and barbed wire, and behind is Auschwitz, which was fully functioning. And they had 5 kids. The baby in the film and in real life was born in Auschwitz, Annegret, Hedwig loved her garden, and they would kiss the kids, and they would go to school, and then Rudolf Höss would walk about 90 seconds or on his horse, trot into the camp and work managing the mass killing of hundreds of thousands of people every day, families, gassing, slave labor, torture, mass murder, right? 1 million human beings murdered at Auschwitz in between 1940, middle of 1941 and 45. And then he would go home and he would read his kids a bedtime story, and they were living their best life. And there was something in that proximity that the garden sort of metaphorized, if that was a metaphor for, that was almost, it was almost like out of fiction, isn't it, as a metaphor? But it's not, it both acts as metaphor, but it was also real. So once we found the real Hösses, John was like, okay, I want to make a film about them. I don't want a story, I just want to make a film about that idea. And then we were in a long process of like, given that it's not the story in the book, well, what is it? And so then I'll have to, bridge this, but then it was a process of research that went on for about 3 or 4 years with Lucy in London. We had a research producer in Poland, and we were just gathering. John describes it as an archaeological dig. So we hired some researchers. They went through. We were working alongside the Auschwitz Museum the whole time, and we went through all the archives, searching for any. The brief to the researchers was any reference to the Rudolf Höss, Hedwig, the children, anything that happened in the home, and also in the lives of other SS officers in their homes. And we sort of were sifting. We got memos and orders and protocols, pretty much everything. Not, there are scenes that are obviously like interpolations, like John's, the scene of the, I don't know who's seen the film, but of Hedwig and Rudolf when they have an argument, and then they make a deal by the riverside about how he'll go, because he's going to be transferred and she doesn't want to leave. That became the sort of fulcrum of the film, which was a real thing we read about in research that had been overheard by one of the gardeners, that Rudolf was going to be transferred and he expected the whole family to go with him because they were a military family. And she was like, I'm not going. What are you kidding? This is, you'd have to drag me out of here. And when John read that in research, he was like, okay, well, that's when that you can base a film on that idea. But all the orders that are given about the lilac, the sort of protocols he's dictating and things like that are all a collage of real things. And then it was about sort of shaping all this research into a script. And that took about 3 or 4 years. And then very quickly we sent that script to, we decided who we wanted to make the film with, which was the people we'd worked with before. And so we showed it to Film 4 first, who we'd made Under the Skin with, and then A24, who we'd also did Under the Skin with. And then through one of our, a woman called Tessa Ross, who used to run Film 4, who is now a producer but had to deal with access, we went to them. So our way of doing things is to work with people who've worked with you before, because as John said, everyone's great on the first date, but it's when you're in month 18 of post, or that, when the shit's hitting the fan, then you. So actually, the financing of the film was relatively easy. Sorry, this is the longest answer ever, but the challenges.
My job is really easy right now.
The challenges were creative ones. The challenges were, what is the film of this idea, and what should it be, given that it's not this book? Sorry.
Well, that was remarkable, just like the movie. Wow. And we are out of time, because that was a remarkably long answer, but in the best way. In the best way.
There was the sound and the music, and
there were so many things to talk to you about, but we are out of time. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. Thank you so much to all of our nominees. Thank you to the Academy Museum for hosting us, and everybody tune in on Sunday to see who's going to take home the gold. Thank you so much. Good night, everybody.